You need to watch this if you struggle with love and loss. This is a story submitted by a viewer. Mia and Ryan met on a crisp autumn afternoon, just as the leaves were turning shades of orange and red. It was one of those chance encounters that felt like fate. They bumped into each other at a small cafe, their hands brushing as they both reached for the last pumpkin spice latte on the counter. They laughed it off, and what started as a simple conversation turned into hours of talking, sharing stories, and discovering a connection neither had felt before. From that day on, their lives became beautifully intertwined. Mia had recently moved to the city, starting a new job and leaving behind her small hometown. The city was overwhelming, bustling with energy and people who always seemed to be in a hurry. But in Ryan, she found a sense of calm, a familiarity that made the city feel less intimidating. He introduced her to his favorite spots, hidden parks, quaint bookstores, and quiet corners of the city that felt like their own little secret worlds. For Ryan, meeting Mia was like a breath of fresh air. He had lived in the city for years, but it had started to feel routine, almost monotonous. Mia's enthusiasm for exploring every nook and cranny reignited his love for the place. They spent their weekends wandering through markets, trying out new restaurants, and sitting by the river, talking about everything from childhood dreams to fears about the future. As time went on, their bond deepened. They were the kind of couple who could spend hours together in comfortable silence or talk late into the night about their hopes and aspirations. Mia loved how Ryan could turn a simple moment into something special. Like the time he surprised her with a picnic in the park on a rainy day, knowing how much she loved the sound of rain on the leaves, or the way he would leave little notes for her to find, scribbled with silly drawings or sweet messages. But as the months turned into years, the relationship began to shift in ways neither of them could ignore. The initial excitement of being together gave way to the realities of everyday life. Mia's job became more demanding, with long hours and increasing responsibilities. Ryan, an artist who thrived on inspiration, found himself in a creative slump, struggling to find motivation in his work. The vibrant city that once felt so full of possibilities now seemed to weigh them down. They started spending more time apart, not out of choice but out of necessity. Mia would come home exhausted, wanting nothing more than to collapse on the couch, while Ryan would retreat to his studio, hoping to find some spark of creativity. The conversations that once flowed so easily between them became more strained, filled with the mundane details of their days rather than the deep, meaningful talks they used to have. Mia noticed the change, and it worried her. She missed the way they used to be. The spontaneous dates, the laughter that came so easily, the feeling of being completely in sync with someone. She tried to bring it up with Ryan a few times, but every time she opened her mouth to speak, she found herself hesitating. She didn't want to seem needy or demanding, didn't want to add more stress to his already full plate. One evening, as they sat quietly in the living room, Mia finally worked up the courage to speak. "Ryan," she began, her voice soft but firm, "do you ever feel like we're drifting apart?" Ryan looked up from his sketchbook, surprise flickering in his eyes. He hesitated before responding. "I've noticed it too, Mia. I just didn't know how to bring it up. I've been so caught up in my work trying to find inspiration again, but I can feel the distance between us. I don't want to lose what we have." "Neither do I," Mia said, her voice trembling slightly, "but it feels like we're living in different worlds now, and I don't know how to bridge that gap. I miss how we used to be, Ryan. I miss us." Ryan reached out and took her hand, his grip gentle but full of emotion. "I miss us too. I don't want us to keep drifting like this. Maybe we just need some time to figure things out, to find ourselves again." The tipping point came on a cold winter evening. Mia had come home after a particularly grueling day at work, her mind buzzing with stress and fatigue. She found Ryan in the living room, staring blankly at a canvas. Seeing him so lost in his own world triggered something in her. She realized in that moment how disconnected they had become, how lonely she felt even when they were together. She sat down beside him, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. For a long time they sat in silence, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Mia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ryan, we need to talk." The words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Ryan turned to look at her, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and resignation. He knew what was coming, had felt it building for months, but hearing the words out loud made it real in a way he wasn't prepared for. Mia poured out her heart, telling Ryan how she had been feeling, how the distance between them had grown too vast to ignore. She talked about how much she missed the connection they once had, how lonely she had been feeling despite being in a relationship. Ryan listened, his heart sinking with each word. He wanted to fix it, wanted to go back to the way things were, but he didn't know how. In that moment, they both realized they had been holding on to something that was no longer there. The love they had for each other was still there, but it had changed, morphed into something different. They had grown apart, not out of a lack of love, but because life had pulled them in different directions. They talked late into the night, exploring the depths of their feelings and what had gone wrong. They both cried, mourning the loss of the relationship they once had. It was clear that neither of them wanted to hurt the other, but they also knew that staying together out of obligation or fear of being alone wasn't fair to either of them. By the time the sun began to rise, they had come to a mutual decision. They needed time apart, time to figure out who they were without each other. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was one they both knew was necessary. They packed up a few things, and Mia left the apartment they had shared for so long. The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of relief and sadness. They had both agreed to give each other space, to take the time they needed to heal and reflect. Mia moved in with a friend, throwing herself into her work as a way to cope with the emptiness she felt. Ryan, on the other hand, found solace in his art, using his emotions as fuel for his creativity. They still thought about each other often, wondering if they had made the right decision. Mia found herself going back to the cafe where they first met, sitting by the window and watching the world go by, lost in memories of the life they had built together. Ryan would sometimes walk by the park where they used to spend their afternoons, his mind filled with thoughts of what could have been. But as time passed, they both started to find their way again. Mia realized she had been relying on the relationship to fill a void within herself, a void she needed to learn how to fill on her own. She started taking time for herself, exploring new hobbies, and reconnecting with old friends. She began to feel a sense of independence and strength that she hadn't felt in a long time. Ryan, too, found a new sense of purpose. His art began to flourish in ways it hadn't before, as he poured all of his emotions into his work. He started exhibiting his pieces in local galleries, gaining recognition for the raw, honest emotion that radiated from his canvases. He realized that while the relationship had been a significant part of his life, it wasn't the only thing that defined him. Eventually, they reconnected. It wasn't a dramatic reunion, but a quiet, peaceful conversation over coffee. They talked about what they had been through, how they had grown and changed. There was no bitterness or regret, just a mutual understanding that they had done what was best for both of them. "You look happy," Ryan said, a soft smile on his lips. "I am," Mia replied, her eyes warm. "And you? How's your art going?" "Better than ever, actually. I think I needed this time to really find myself again." They parted ways that day with a sense of closure, knowing that their story had come to an end. It wasn't the ending they had once envisioned, but it was one they could both live with. They wished each other well, knowing that while they would always care for one another, their paths had diverged, leading them to new and different futures. Mia often returns to that cafe, remembering the love they shared and the lessons they learned. She still thinks of Ryan, wondering where he is, what he's doing, and if he ever thinks of her too. Their story didn't have the happy ending they once dreamed of, but it was real and it was theirs. Thank you for sharing your story, Mia. And to everyone watching, remember that even in heartbreak, there is growth, and every ending is the beginning of something new.